Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And one of the most important update is coming from Kharkiv direction. This night there was a prisoner exchange process. Either the Russians and the Ukrainians managed to return back home around 90 soldiers. A very interesting details we're receiving from the village by the name of Volkhavatka. I'll remind you that a few days ago the Ukrainians attacked this territory with attack missiles, and as a result of the strike there was a very heavy explosion, and the Ukrainians managed to destroy a very big ammo depot in this area. And today we got the first satellite pictures, satellite videos confirming that the territory was completely set on fire as a result of another attack. As for the situation on the ground, the Ukrainians published the video of how they were storming and attacking the village by the name of Gluboka. In this video, for example, we can see the Ukrainian armored vehicle was moving from Liptsy towards the village of Gluboka and was attacking the Ukrainian positions from a distance under very heavy Russian artillery fire. This video gave us lots of very interesting information. First of all, this video shows us and tells us that the Russians still control the village of Gluboka. The Ukrainians have possibilities to get very close to this area, but as you can see, the Ukrainians still are not making any attempts to enter the village because they understand that the Russians dig in deeper, very deep in this area. According to the group of forces north, the Russians are saying that currently there is a small operational pause in the direction. During the previous night, the Ukrainians made one attempt to attack the Russian forces in the eastern Vovchansk. That attack was repelled by the Russians. During the night, the Ukrainians made five attempts to get additional reinforcements and reserves from the southern part in direction of the northern part, but the Russians discovered everything and attacked the Ukrainians with artillery and drones. And as for Liptsy, no activity at all, and the Russians are saying that there is something like the silence before the storm. The Ukrainians are trying to regroup themselves, and the Ukrainians are trying to understand how should they act in because now the Russians are using FAB 3000 and different calibers of FAB massively, and of course it forced the Ukrainians to make changes and adjustments in their plans. Now let's move in the northern Kharkiv direction. After very long artillery preparation in this area, just to remind you that since the beginning of the month, this territory was under very heavy fire from the Russian side. The Russians destroyed and bombed almost every single square kilometer in this direction, and after very long and massive artillery preparation, the Russians began offensive operations in direction of Petropavlovka. In this video that was published by the Russian forces, by the Russian sources, we can see another attempt to attack from the Russian side, and as a result of the clashes between the Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, the Russians managed to establish complete control over a stronghold towards the village of Petropavlovka. First, the Russians were bombing this territory heavily, and after that the Russians began the ground operation and clearing the trenches. So this fortification area, this stronghold, was captured by the Russians. The Russians were attacking from the northern direction. This is very important, let's say, progress, because now we understand what the Russians are planning to do or are trying to achieve, and the main Russian goal is to get as close as possible to small water reservoir, water barrier, and to capture this territory. If the Russians are able to do this, then it will allow the Russians to get as close as possible to the main road that goes from Petropavlovka to Orlovka. So we are talking about this road, and by reaching this line, maybe if the Russians are able to move even further, they will be able to establish complete fire control over the road, over this road, and this will reduce the possibilities of armed forces of Ukraine to redeploy additional reinforcements and reserves from Petropavlovka in the eastern direction. So if the Russians are able to get this line, they will cut physically the road between Petropavlovka and Orlovka. We are talking about this road, and then if Ukrainians send reinforcements from Petropavlovka to the east, of course these reinforcements might be destroyed as a result of Russian artillery, mortar or FPV drone fire. This will allow the Russians in the eastern part, in the vicinity of Orlovka, to begin movements in the western direction, so without almost any resistance from the Ukrainian side. Just a small maneuver from the Russian side with the purpose to reduce Ukrainian, let's say, counter offensive possibilities. As for Stelmakhovka, during the previous night, we got a lot of very interesting updates. We have the videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in this area, something like artillery preparation. And later, two different pro-Russian but very reliable sources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians entered the southeastern part of Stelmakhovka and managed to dig in deeper. Once again, two different resources confirmed this information, and the clashes is already inside of the village. Telling the truth, we started receiving first updates about the clashes inside of the village a few days ago, but maybe today we got more or less reliable updates. Maybe today we're gonna receive the first geolocations or videos confirming this. Now let's move to Razdolovka, a very complicated and difficult situation. Some sources are saying that the Russians control 50% of the village. Some sources are saying that the Russians control 70% of the village. Some sources are saying that the Russians managed to capture the strongholds that located in the northern part and that the village is already encircled and there are just few Ukrainian positions inside those Ukrainians who were encircled by the Russians, and the Russians are finishing the clearing of this territory. Anyway, we can, summarizing everything, we can tell that the battle for Razdolovka is about to be finished. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but obviously by the end of the week, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation should include the report about complete control over the village in their daily summaries. As for Chasiv Yar, no updates, just small videos from the Ukrainian side of reconnaissance operation. And you know that this is a very interesting situation currently about the Chasiv Yar stronghold, about Vovchansk stronghold, about Vovchansk aggregate plant. We stopped receiving any updates about these territories. It's very difficult to understand. It seems that the Russians do have some plans regarding these strongholds, but the Russians are waiting for something. I don't know what exactly the Russians are waiting for, but maybe they are planning to start using FAB 3000 and just to show the world, to show the Ukrainians what kind of powerful weapon they have. As for Druzhba and Toretsk, we haven't received anything. More details we start receiving from Arkhangelsk, Cheretsina, and the Pokrovsk directions. The most important is that the Ukrainians, announced the complete and forced evacuation of the Ukrainians from the villages that located on the road between Cheretsina and Konstantinovka itself. So the villages like Alexandropol, Romanovka, Novopoltavka, Zarya, all these villages will be evacuated in the very near future, and the Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian army will, take the positions inside of the residential area. So that means that Ukrainians probably got some reconnaissance information that confirmed that the Russians are planning to start movement exactly in this direction. So they just want to be prepared before, clashes that are going to take place very soon. As for the Sokol and Novoalexandrovka, we haven't received anything. Additional updates are coming from Karlovka. Today, the Russian sources published the video of clashes with the Ukrainians in this direction. Very heavy clashes. The Russians are storming the northern part of Karlovka, and the Russians are sending infantry, soldiers, armored vehicles, personal carriers. The Ukrainians tried to repel Russian attacks by sending additional reinforcements and reserves, and currently the situation in this area is very difficult. The thing is that the Ukrainians still haven't managed to evacuate their soldiers from the fields between Yasnobrodovka and Karlovka, and this is a very long and very difficult process. The Russians are trying to create a cauldron in this area. If the Russians are able to get this part of Karlovka, of course the Ukrainians in Yasnobrodovka and the fields would be encircled. So that's why the Ukrainians try to hold the corridor, try to hold the roads for evacuation, and the main purpose of the Ukrainians is to keep some safe road that Ukrainians can use for evacuation, maybe for supplying and supporting of their forces along this line. So this is the thing is that there are very heavy clashes. The Russians understand the Ukrainian positions, that the Ukrainian positions are weak, and the Russians will improve their, attempts to attack in this direction in the very near future. As for Krasnogorovka, we just got one video showing us that the Russians were bombing and attacking the citadel. I'll remind you that according to information we have, this territory was captured by the Russians, at least according to deep state map. Maybe today we start receiving the videos of artillery preparation before further attempts to attack the territory. The Ukrainians continue reporting and giving us additional updates about the situation between Vadiana, Ugledar, Volodymyrovka and Solotka. And the Ukrainians today published another post of how they managed to break through the encirclement. The Ukrainians there of the 72nd Mechanized were located in something like a cauldron for more than 10 days, but after the Ukrainians redeployed additional reinforcements and reserves, and after a series of counterattacks, the Ukrainians managed to unblock the soldiers from this area, and the Ukrainians successfully abandoned this territory. But the Ukrainians are saying that during that process they suffered significant losses. That's it about the situation on the ground. We have a lot of very interesting political updates that I would like to discuss with you. As you know, the European Union is going to start discussion and negotiation with Ukraine about the membership on this NATO summit that is going to take place in July in Washington. And as we discussed, the Washington expects the positive results and positive decisions on that summit. We have report that the Ukrainians, the prisoners, former prisoners that decided to join Ukraine army, start running away and escaping the military camps and military exercise centers. I reminded that a few weeks ago, the Ukrainians adopted a law allowing them to mobilize prisoners, and lots of prisoners signed contracts with the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and now they start running and escaping the exercise centers. We have report that during the previous night, for the first time since the 2023, the Minister of Defense of Russia and the head of Pentagon, Lloyd Austin, had a conversation, had a call, and they talk about the situation in Ukraine. Most likely, they were talking about attack on the Crimean shore that took place a few days ago with the casualties among civilians, and of course they were talking about the accidents in the skies, how to avoid accidents in the skies between Russian aircrafts like Su-30 or MiG-31 with U.S. Global Hawks, and also the head of Pentagon, Austin, told the Russians that they are not planning to send forces on the territory of Ukraine. But as for Joe Biden, we see that Biden administration moves towards allowing American military contracts to deploy to Ukraine. This is done. This can be done to, let's say, reduce the timings of maintaining and service of the Western weapon that Western countries are going to redeploy in the very near future. Also, we have reports and different statements from different political, let's say, military persons who says that if Russia concerned about casualties, they should stop this war. Pentagon on strikes on Crimea. And the same report we got from the Europe. According to the same reports, we have information that empty beaches should be signed for Kremlin, that it's gradually losing control over Crimea. So we don't see any support. We don't see anything from European countries, just some yelling and nothing more. And according to information we have, NATO will officially name outgoing Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte the alliance next ahead on Wednesday, so today. I'll remind you that the Stoltenberg positions that will remain still the 1st of October. So his term will be ends on October the 1st, and then the Mark Rutte is going to be the next Secretary General of NATO. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.